to Cinema Boulevard. My name is Daniel McGregor Hoyer.
And my name is Matthew Huh.
And we're coming at you in Infinity Vision.
Ooh, new film format?
Oh, yeah, new film format. Not necessarily. I know you haven't watched it. I for some reason I decided to watch it, but like the recent Avengers Doomsday trailer came out, and I guess like I don't know. For one, the trailer looked like shit. Like it's like I haven't made it a secret that I'm not really excited for this film. I guess I'm more or less excited to see like how this film is gonna work. Just because it kind of felt like, like it's like the fire extinguisher thing where it's like break glass if in case of an emergency.
Yeah.
And that's what this whole thing feels like. And it really shows in the trailer because I cannot connect with like, it's these side characters from Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four. And it's like characters I could care less about. It's the reason they got Thor in there. It's a good reason, but I don't know. But regardless of the trailer, it's like they've had it end in this like thing that called Infinity Vision, and I guess they already have advanced tickets on sale right now. And
oh yeah, they went on sale.
Yeah, they like went on sale as the trailer dropped, which I guess everybody's doing now because the Odyssey did it, obviously, and then Dune did it recently. We talked about that, but I guess like Marvel's doing it, but instead of IMAX 70mm, it's Infinity Vision, which like I don't even know what the fuck that is.
It's nothing. It's just marketing words.
Yeah, it's like it's funny. It's really, really funny. Because and as I'm like looking this up on Google, apparently there's a place called Infinity Vision in Dallas, which is a Vision workplace. So I guess that's also pretty funny. I wonder how they managed to fight. I don't know. They probably fought that copyright pretty easily. But it's like it's so in accordance to Google AI or whatever. And this is just the AI review, so you don't know if you could trust it or not. But it says Infinity Vision, in quotations, is Disney's newly launched premium theater certification program, heavily promoted alongside ticket pre-sales for Avengers Doomsday. It guarantees a specific top-tier large-screen technical standard for moviegoers. But my question is, like, do people know that the reason they're doing this is because Dune Part 3 took up all of the IMAX screens for that day?
I think people probably do know because Dune is now, I would say more people are excited for Dune. And I think because, not to get ahead of ourselves, because of films like The Odyssey and Nolan, IMAX is now at the forefront and the general pop culture osmosis. So I think people are more aware of what the format is now. So I think Disney can hide it all they want. They know that they're doing this to overcompensate for the fact that they don't have the IMAX screens, at least for opening week or, the first few weeks. I assume eventually it'll get released in IMAX, probably after Dune's exclusivity run. But based on how pre-sales have been, I wouldn't be surprised if that run gets extended, or at the very least, the ones that are capable of doing the 70mm IMAX prints, those will stay for Doom, but then everything else, the digital ones, will get Doomsday.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I doubt any part of Doomsday would have been filmed on like legit IMAX film. I mean, I know Dune technically, it's sort of a mixture digital and IMAX. So I think part of it did have IMAX film, right?
So, what Dune 3 or the previous Dune films?
Dune 3.
Yeah, Dune 3 was shot partially on IMAX 70mm. I think it was primarily shot on regular 70mm film, which is interesting because the first two Dune films were shot digitally, but then they like transferred the master to effectively a 35 millimeter scan and then scanned that back to digital to get the grain texture, which is really interesting how they did that. Not really sure why that was done. If you have access to the film cameras, maybe just like the weather conditions or something. But I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely because of films like Oppenheimer and Sinners that have heavily used the IMAX format, and then they realize that like, oh, audiences are very receptive to that, so let's do it for Dune, especially if it's the trilogy capper.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like it's so like you could just tell they're they're compensating on the fact they didn't get IMAX. I mean, and the thing is, I was watching IG's like whole reaction to the trailer or whatever, and I guess like what Doomsday was made for, if you count marketing, $700 million. So essentially the
Are
most
you serious?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, including marketing. So you would have to think that the Infinity Vision probably has something to do with it because they're trying to get all the premium format theaters because of Dune just being an IMAX. I mean, obviously, it'll still be in like some other formats as well, but they're trying to get Dolby Vision, ScreenX, D-Box, 4DX, ScreenX. Yeah, that thing is fucking stupid. That's just personal opinion, but I just like you think it's like you know, they're back that they're paying for so many premium formats just to get like Doomsday out. And the fact that like they didn't bother trying to move it either. Like they still want
Right.
that
Yeah.
December 18th like time frame. And honestly, it's like I don't know if this is gonna like make or break Doomsday, you know? I mean, obviously like the film itself hasn't come out yet, so we can't necessarily judge on like the film, but like the fact that like is it gonna make more money just based on how many more like premium formats it's in, like, or is it gonna make more money based on the fact that people are gonna see it, or is it not gonna make as much at all because like what we saw those IMAX Part 3 tickets like go pretty quickly. So we are in a point where like Doomsday is either going to make the like really help the MCU be more successful, or it's going to completely break the MCU. It's gonna be kind of funny. I don't know.
Yeah, of course we can't talk about like the content of the film itself because it's not out yet, but I think regardless, this film will still make a lot of money. The one thing that Doomsday has going for it, not having IMAX screens, is that arguably it does not necessitate seeing it in IMAX. It's not like the IMAX 70 millimeter films where that's a big push for the market. It's like, oh, you have to see it in this format. It's on the film. Doomsday's being on IMAX was just a following the formula. It's like, oh, you have a big blockbuster tentpole. Oh, you got to put in the premium format. So if anything, what if I were in charge, what I would have done for Doomsday was try to push Dolby Cinema in that way, because Dolby Cinema is an equally excellent format. It's probably the best image quality you can see in theaters right now. Make that the selling point. Like you get the clearest visuals and the best sound, which arguably that's what you want for a superhero film. That's instead of doing this whole Infinity Vision crap, they should have done that and really pumped up Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. And I don't know. I think it'll still do well regardless. So I obviously, if it had the IMAX screens, it would have made a decent percentage more. But it wouldn't. I don't think it's not going to make. It's not going to destroy its box office return potential. So I know people were saying that, which I just kind of laugh and be like, I don't think that's true. But admittedly, the hubris that Disney had to like not even budge moving the release date was pretty ridiculous. Like if you care that much, you should move. Honestly, move it up so that people can see it sooner.
It's funny. So I'm going for the Wikipedia. So they already made a Wikipedia page for Infinity Vision, and apparently it does have like a website too. So like you're gonna sort of question whether or not they're gonna continue with this stupid thing. But there's technical specs on it right now. And it says in order for a theater to become Infinity Vision certified, they must meet at minimum the following standards: a screen width of at least 45 feet, Dolby Surround 7.1 sound system, or an immersive sound system such as Dolby Atmos, and brightness levels reaching either 14 foot Lamberts in 2D or 6 foot Lamberts in 3D, which is just controlling the brightness. But it's funny because this is essentially already Dolby Atmos. They're just like they're grabbing a sticker and then they're just smacking it right on the Dolby theater. Like that's what they're doing. Like
Yeah,
it's
because
compensation.
yeah, because to clarify, like Infinity Vision is not a new format. It's literally a certification program. It's just like a stamp of approval from Marvel and Disney. So they're not re-engineering the film grain or the film stock as we know it. It's just, oh, you meet the parameters, so you get this label. It's kind of like the the Cinemark XD theaters, or I know AMC, they have one now. I forget what it's called, but it's just, yeah, it meets a certain standard. So literally any theater in the country could technically have Infinity Vision as long as it meets the parameters, which is even more dumb that they're trying to make it out to be like, oh, it's this new film format, like it's the new, I don't know, VistaVision or something. It's not. It's absolutely not. So it would be, and I will say I'm glad Disney is not charging more money to see Doomsday in those theaters, because that would be absolutely heinous. To my knowledge, they're not doing that, so that's good at least. But the fact that they're doing this at all is just really silly.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we've already talked about how much they're sort of making fools of themselves. I mean, what the last episode they already were. Just and of course, what like that's desperation right now for Marvel. I mean, yeah, I mean, Brand New Day comes out next week as of the time we are recording, and that'll do successful. Like that'll still
Yeah,
do
I think that'll do
successful.
well.
Yeah, but like in terms of like but it's like it's fucking Spider-Man, you know? Because Spider-Man, people love Spider-Man. They'll see Spider-Man in theaters regardless of what movie he's in. Um so you're kind of like so the thing is like with Doomsday, it's like what outside of Doctor Doom or MF Doom. Big shout out to the guy who makes rhymes like "Dimes for a Crime," rest in peace. Um, but like outside of like what him and Chris Hemsworth and Chris Evans, it's like who's your main draw for this film? You know, like I know it's Doctor Doom, but it's like I don't know. We'll probably talk about it more like months down the road when we hit Doomsday finally. Um, but yeah, we like I said, it's Marvel's sort of in panic mode right now. They did this because they're panicking about the MCU's relevancy right now. So we'll see. uh, but yeah, I guess and speaking of like large formats, you know, we probably feel like psychos a year ago when the day of July 17th, 2025 to be exact, when like the advanced IMAX 70 millimeter tickets for the Odyssey dropped. Now I'm feeling pretty fucking smart.
Yeah, that was a
Because
smart investment.
well yeah, and it's also because like, my sister is wanting to see it. And my dad's also wanting to see it as well. It's like, oh, we could check for the 70 millimeter IMAX or whatever. And it's like all the screenings like down here are sold out until like late August. Um,
Yeah, I think that's most places in the country right
yeah,
now.
like it's insane. Just like the level of format, not level, but the level of excitement that was behind the Odyssey a year in advance, and it's finally out. But we both had our commemorative tickets with us. So we, because I don't know if you bought it off Fandango, I did. But yeah, we both had our commemorative tickets. What did he get a commemorative film print too? Because I didn't.
I didn't. They didn't hand out the film strips, but we got actually a poster, which I haven't rolled it out yet, but it's apparently in the same dimensions as the 1.4301 IMAX screen, which is really cool.
What?
So
It's 5 stories tall.
no,
That'll
it's
be
not. It's
fucking
not to
crazy.
scale, but
I'll be fucking crazy, bro. You envelop
yeah,
New York that way.
pretty much, yeah.
But yeah, this is obviously like one of our most anticipated films of the year, and yeah, it finally came out. I mean, I'm obviously gonna see it again this week. Um, but yeah, it's really hard to like describe the excitement behind the Odyssey. Just purely based off of one man, and that's Christopher Nolan, who's, practically it's already put himself in the upper echelon of filmmakers. Whether you love him or hate him, you can't deny like the level of impact that he's had on the film industry, especially in this century, which is really awesome. And yeah, it's like we're purely your people are going to see a movie because of an auteur. It's fucking insane. Um, but yeah, I guess before we sort of jump in, you know, thoughts on Chris Nolan.
Oh, he's one of the best filmmakers of our time. I would argue, incredibly consistent, incredibly groundbreaking, especially with how he reshaped how we view like big premium blockbusters, and he has this sense of control and freedom within the parameters of a big studio system. In a way, he's kind of similar to Stanley Kubrick in that regard, where this is a definitely an auteur, an artist that has a lot to say and is given incredible freedom to do so. And with every Nolan film, you just know that you're going to see something special, and that's only been amplified, I would argue, more and more throughout the years. So arguably where we're at now with the Odyssey is his like new peak of excitement, because everyone was excited for Oppenheimer. And I know some people like to bring that like, oh, Barbie counter programming helped too. But regardless, it's no one has proved himself by that point. So after Oppenheimer, it was clear that all eyes were on him to do whatever his next project was. And when it was announced that he was going to tackle the Odyssey, I remember thinking like that's incredible that we're gonna get a big budget adaptation of the epic poem of the same name. And when I think that alone was exciting in and of itself, but then it was reported that he was going to shoot the entire thing on IMAX, which has never been done before for a feature length film. And the reason being is that the technical specifications of the IMAX format was that they're incredibly loud, incredibly bulky cameras, but Nolan alongside IMAX, they were able to develop these new lighter cameras, the Keeley cameras, that were able to essentially film the entire thing in IMAX, which is simply an astonishing feat. So I know a lot of people, we're definitely going to talk about the format in of itself, but to talk about the film too, I admittedly, I don't think I've read the Odyssey, the original poem. I guess I was one of the few people in this country who didn't read it in school, but even still, the Odyssey as a story is essentially the foundational hero's journey. Like every sort of adventure quest narrative that we see now has taken inspiration and influence from the Odyssey. And so to see that adapted in a big modern format, I found really cool, because there hasn't been many straight adaptations of the Odyssey. We've seen reinterpretations over the years. Like the one I could think of would be what's it, the Coen brothers, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," which I believe is like heavily inspired, if not a direct adaptation, but very much inspired. But to see like this actually taking place in ancient Greece is really cool to see. And so for that, I was like, okay, I'm looking forward to this. And yeah, watching it in the IMAX theater, I was like Daniel said, we were one of the few lucky ones to see it opening day, very first showtime too. And yeah, it was incredibly impressive, an incredibly impressive film. I'll just say this up front. I personally don't think this is one of Nolan's absolute best, but that still doesn't change the fact that this is a really great film overall. The sense of scope and scale in the narrative is what you'd expect from a story like this, but it also really dives into the fantastical weirdness of the Odyssey. And there was also been a lot of discourse surrounding the quote unquote historical accuracies, but I think people need to remember the Odyssey is not a biblical story. This is a work of fiction. It is a great adventure that takes a lot of liberties. And you see that in Nolan's interpretation. It's not like he's trying to make a super faithful adaptation, but in a way, it's almost like he's approaching it through the lens of a 1950s or 1960s spectacle film. The emphasis on the scale, the performances are very much actors performing, but it's in this sort of with a sense of theatricality that we don't really see all that often. Hence why a lot of the actors are speaking in their own native dialect and all that. So, but overall, it really does focus on the characters of Odysseus, who goes on this long journey home after the Trojan War, and you really just sense the like all everything that's thrown at him, like all the obstacles he has to overcome, and just the tension and thrill that comes about it, and the fact that it was shot primarily practically on location makes it all the more believable and spectacular too. So yeah, overall, it is truly an epic film, and I mean that in the best way possible. And yeah, all in all, I was just like in awe for majority of it. I just like I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and you sense that excitement in the theater too. It's a great theatrical experience, not even just in IMAX, but I would argue in any format that you see it in. It carries the sense of weight and gravitas that only Nolan could bring.
I think it's insane that, we're sort of seeing this like modern day audience starting to connect with something that is, let's face it, everybody should know the story of the Odyssey at this point. Even if like you haven't necessarily read it, it's so foundational to almost any story out there. So and I could see like elements of the Odyssey being used in like the hero's journey. But even in like, slow period dramas, like slow dramas and period dramas as well, because you have put the whole idea of like, a character kind of going through like these trials and tribulations to sort of get back to where they need to be. Is something that you see in like almost every story now. Like, I mean, and that, it's obviously how foundational like Greek mythology and Greek philosophy was for a lot of people. And I'm a Greek mythology nerd in some respects. Like, I've always been fascinated by Greek storytelling and just those stories in general about like, the gods and how they sort of like impacted the world in some way. Like, yeah, we in some senses we don't know if like these things are like actually happened or not, but there is always like interesting history of like what people sort of thought back in the day and like how these stories just sort of resonate. It's sort of like how like American folk tales work, or how like legends work in some cases. And the Odyssey is foundational for all that. And I guess like the thing I like was really fascinated by with the Odyssey is that more or less it's just like how this whole sort of journey just starts to wear on you as the film goes along. Like it doesn't, you kind of feel like you really went on, it's like it's like what Lord of the Rings or whatever, where it's like you really start to feel the weight of everything around you. And then like once it's all done, like you feel like this sense of like pressure off your shoulders. Like that's the Odyssey. Because yeah, I mean everybody should know the story in some cases. And and yeah, there's different interpretations to the story, because let's face it, people don't actually know that Homer, like nobody doesn't know that Homer actually existed. um Apologies to Matt Groening. Homer did not exist. But but yeah, there's a lot of speculation about where the story of the Odyssey came from, and Homer could be like a whole collection of artists or writers, and like you don't. So like there's not necessarily like saying like like hearing people say, oh yeah, Homer's turning in his grave. It's like uh which like did you know that like he may or may not exist? um, but it's it's interesting, but I think like with the Odyssey, with the Nolan's version of the story, like it really works just in terms of how it's told. And it kind of does get off to a little bit of a shaky start, but once it goes along, it really trucks along, and you start to really see all these ordeals and obstacles that Odysseus is going through, and then also the kind of the cross cutting to the plot at home with Telemachus and Penelope, sort of dealing with like these suitors inside of the castle, trying to get to the throne that belongs to Odysseus. And it's really impressive in just how, that tension just sort of builds, and there's like a level of engagement there that really makes the story work. And I know like we could sort of like nitpick Nolan's direction a little bit, but I think he's like got it down pretty nicely, using like really grounding this world of Greek mythology and realism, but still having those moments of just like pure like fantasy in there. And yeah, it really impressed me. I know there's probably more we'll jump into, but yeah, it just really impressed me. I don't know where I put it in Nolan's filmography, but like, I don't know. I gotta catch it a second time just to see, but from initial thoughts, like it's really, really great. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
Trying to figure out where to necessarily begin with the film, but I think I was taken aback by how structurally it's told too, because for someone that's not as familiar with the narrative or the original text, I was surprised that the film is fairly non-linear too, which is, if I want to say, I want to meet before we like gush over it. If there's a bit of a criticism that I have with the film, is that it sometimes takes a while to find its footing, particularly in the first act. You're kind of just thrown into the story with all these characters, and when it cuts sort of like back and forth through time, it's hard to sort of distinguish like, okay, what's like the narrative causation from like beginning to end. But it makes sense for that build up and structure to get to the third act, which I don't know, spoilers, I guess, for the Odyssey, but it just
spoilers.
yeah, I mean, I in fairness, I don't know if how much this differs from the original text, but yeah, no, but once it gets up to the inevitable conclusion of Odysseus's journey, there is this unbelievable sense of satisfaction and also a emotional impact that the film provides, similar to Oppenheimer, where the more context that gets revealed is sort of detailing the sense of the journey that he has to go through, and also the regrets and decisions that he made along the way too. So it gets more into that sense of character, but overall, just the amount of players in the film to really sell the scale. Like there's so many actors and like bit parts too, where you like recognize certain people. They're just like, oh, they're just they're in there for one scene, but it adds to the believability of this world too. And yeah, there's another thing too about the casting that's very interesting, is how for the most part, like all the acting is very good, but there's at some points you can sense that it's like, oh, I see the actor more than a character. At first that bothered me, but then the more I thought about it and sort of the approach that Nolan was trying to take as this being a more, in a way, it's aware that it's a movie. It's aware that this is a story that's been told over generations, basically. That added sense of theatricality goes to show, reinforces the Odyssey's place as a work of epic fiction. Like this is not meant to be, like I said, a story that was told in, let's say, the Bible. Like these are none of these are real people. It's mythology. It's about gods and goddesses and like weird creatures too. So it's reinforcing that fantastical nature while still being very grounded too. Like one thing that was also mentioned is that the fact that the gods that always take a presence in the story, like, oh, Zeus's law, Poseidon bringing on the rain and the heavy storms too. We never see the gods themselves necessarily. It reinforces this mystique and intrigue of these sort of faith that these everyday people in ancient Greece have in the gods. But is that all just an illusion? Is it actual? Is that faith genuine? Are they real? It keeps it keeps us at a distance almost alongside the characters. And I thought that was a really smart decision because when you think of like big epic Greek myth films, I think of something like, I don't know, Jason and the Argonauts from the 60s, which really visualizes the fantastical nature. But this one, it's almost like spiritual, which is really, really interesting. A very bold approach to that gets dives more into the psychology basically of the Odyssey, which I found really, really interesting and very unexpected. And in some cases bold. It's bold to do that when you have like this much of a budget and resources. Like you would think that no one will want to go all out and show all that, but no, it's really more internalized, and which is really, really interesting.
Yeah, and it's like also like how the gods are sort of like presented in the story because I think we want to see personifications of the god, but of gods here. I mean, because Greek gods were probably like really interesting characters. A lot of them have a body count. Like, has anybody seen Zeus's body count? Like, the dude basically like fucked anything that walked. Like, it's crazy. If you like look into like the really like considering part of Zeus, like Zeus is probably like a Diddy character back in the day. Oh, P Zuzi, man. Pub Zeus. But obviously didn't go that route. Obviously, it would be weird if Nolan did. But yeah, back to jokes aside. You know, like we are so used to seeing like personifications of gods, like best thing I could think of is like Disney's Hercules from the 90s, or like even their version of Percy Jackson, where you get like, these actors playing these Greek gods in a different modernized way. And I liked how Nolan sort of presented the gods here, where you don't necessarily see them. I mean, I guess the only ones who really do are you know Athena, who's played by Zendaya, and Cersei, who's played by fuck, what was her name? It's a really big British actor,
Samantha Morton.
Samantha Morton. Like, yeah, and you had Cersei played by Samantha Morton, and James Raymar as Tiresias. But even then, there's like a lot of ideas like, oh, is he probably just some minor god in some instances, sort of like Cersei? But regardless, there is like this level of like character built through the gods here where it's all environmental. Like, especially like Poseidon, where it's like you really see like Poseidon sort of like not you don't see him, but you kind of see like him making the journey tougher for Odysseus and his crew, but just like sending him on like the most random detours that really test like Odysseus's like hubris and character, and even like testing like his crew as well, and just like the amount of threats he's like posing against them, like making this journey more turbulent than it actually is really impressive. And just how the environment sort of just tells like the character, not tells the character, like how the environment sort of makes the character. Which helps with like Nolan's realistic approach, because that way it makes it more believable in some cases. Like we can kind of say like, oh, it's like they don't appear to like one person, but they don't appear to another. It's very really interesting in how they just how Nolan just sort of like presents this like very grounded story in a way that still has like that level of like fantasy. And like like you said, it's like is it an illusion or is it not? And so I think it's really interesting in how they sort of made it fit very nice with that personification. Yeah, that was pretty awesome. And yeah, dude, but like, let's talk about this cast. Like, this cast is fucking stacked, bro. Like, you got Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Tom Holland, Lupita Nyong'o, Robert Pattinson. Like, you got a lot of heavy hitters. I mean, I guess like the one that surprised me a lot was John Leguizamo. Like I had no idea that was John Leguizamo in the film. I think oddly enough, he probably ended up being my favorite actor, one of my favorite actors in the movie. Because like even like the smallest parts these actors like had, there's still like a level of character that they just add and personality, and they just leave a impact in the story, like even with like Nyong'o's small role as Helen of Troy and Clemestra and Elliot Page as Sinan. Like it's really impressive just how they sort of leave impact. Even like Benny Safdie, which note his face was covered half the time. So like there is still like an aura around Agamemnon. I can't. That's so many M's and N's next to each other. But yeah, there's like so much character that these actors just bring. Like there's a presence to it. I mean, and I don't know. Can't really say there was like a weak performance out of the bunch. I guess like the one that is a little more distracting than that is Tom Holland as Telemachus or whatever. Just because he's sharing the room with some already pretty big heavy hitters in the acting sphere. And not to say that Tom Holland can act, he certainly can. I mean, I really liked him in Devil All the Time, and of course, the MC's Spider-Man. But you can tell there's just the echelon that just differs a lot when he's like next to Robert Pattinson or Anne Hathaway. It's very it's it's like it's a good performance, but it just it's kind of like it's one that just sort of doesn't fit sometimes. But like not doesn't harp on him. It's like more or less just you know the talent he's around. So it's crazy.
Yeah, to go back to the to continue on with the casting, I agree that there's not necessarily a bad performance here. Like you said, John Leguizamo was a surprising highlight. I also thought Robert Pattinson was particularly excellent too. Yeah, and just how he's like the hubris and the ego of that guy is just absolutely absurd. How he's like chewing up the scenery too. He really had fun. I want to give particular praise to Samantha Morton, but I want to come back to that later to talk about the scene too. All the actors do a good job. There are some that sort of play their characters a bit better, even though they kind of just seem more like themselves. Like Anne Hathaway as Penelope did is a prime example where her role is very similar to other characters I've seen her play, but she did a good job. Matt Damon as Odysseus, for the most part, is pretty solid. However, there are some points where I kind of failed to see the character, and I'm just more so like, oh, it's Matt Damon, and that probably has something to do with the Matt Damon had to do with the accents too, because one of the big things that were talked about in that first trailer was the fact that all the actors, well, majority of the actors are speaking in their native accent, which is funny that Tom Holland and Robert Pattinson spoke in American accents when they're British. So I don't know why they didn't do that for them, but I think that sort of is what reinforced the fact that it's like, oh, it's kind of hard. I see actors act. This is not necessarily actors becoming their characters, which is both a good and bad thing, because on the one hand, this is a big film that it's like, oh, I really want to get into the characters and like the dialogue and all that, but then it could be a bit distracting when you just see Matt Damon doing an accent that is indistinguishable from his Jason Bourne persona, for example. So it's a very minor nitpick, and honestly, you kind of get used to it after a while, but especially towards the end, it's like, oh, it's a bit jarring to see that at points. I think the most hilarious casting in the film was Travis Scott, who opens the film, which I did not expect.
I expected it, oddly enough.
Him to open it.
Yeah, well, I guess Christopher Nolan really likes Travis Scott, because he wrote the song for Tenet.
Yep.
And
the end credits.
and which makes sense because I've listened to Travis Scott's music. Rodeo is still his best album. Astroworld fans can fight me. Um, but I think like you know like his production in his music fits very well with like Nolan's like sort of style, all things considered. So I'm not really surprised. But yeah, it is a very funny cameo appearance when it happens. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, I knew he was going to be in the movie because he had already announced it, but it's just hilarious that he's pretty much the first character to show up, and his Nolan's reasoning too is kind of smart because I should preface Travis Scott is not a main character in this film. It's basically a cameo, but he's a bard, so he's the one like retelling the story of the Trojan War through this oral poetry, and Nolan compared that sense of oral poetry to what Travis Scott does as a rapper, which that's pretty smart. But yeah, Travis Scott has a very distinct persona. So to see him open this, was it $250 million Christopher Nolan film is like a bit of a surprise. And at least he does a better job here than in Aggro Drift, the weird Harmony Korine film.
I'm just thinking like other rappers he could have chose. Like I know like obvious ones to be like what Kendrick or like Jay-Z, but it would have been very funny if he went out of pocket and grabbed like Little Xan or Trippie Redd or whatever. Or Drake. I don't know. Drake would probably make everybody fall asleep instantly if we're being honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, go on. I'm making too many jokes right now.
Yeah, no, I mean that was the big thing. I actually really liked Himesh Patel, who is Odysseus's like right hand man, basically, who's in the movie for a lot more than some of the top billed actors in the film. I want to say, but yeah, him going along this journey too, and then also later on, especially getting just more and more aggravated by Odysseus's like hubris and ego throughout the journey, like especially when we said spoilers, but there comes a point on the journey where they have to cross like this cliff that has these monsters that come out of the rocks. Pretty much, they almost look like the mini sandworms from Dune.
Oh yeah, the Celestial, yeah. I think that's
right. So when they're like going through them, they eat like 7 of the men, basically.
Scylla, my mistake.
Scylla, yeah. The Scylla eat a decent amount of the men, but Odysseus knew that they had to sacrifice the men in order for them to continue on, and then Himesh Patel is Eurylochus, I think is how you pronounce it. He's just like, you sacrificed them, you killed them, like you knew, like why would you do that? Basically, just so you sense that frustration more on, like he wants to be by Odysseus' side, but his patience is being tested at every single turn of the journey. And yeah, I thought he did a good job. He's an underrated actor too. So
yeah. I mean, he. I think like there's like a lot of like really strong performances. I know you wanted to talk about Samantha Morton as Cersei. Which like she's only on screen for 5-8 minutes, not even, I don't know, maybe like 10 minutes really, but
just like one scene.
Yeah, like one scene, and she like honestly best supporting actress right there.
Mhm.
Like she really like made such a impression on people. Because like she really like because for those who don't know anything about like Cersei's sort of like considered to be like the goddess of animals. In Greek mythology. I know people know her for like oddly enough being a DC villain, because like she's one of like Wonder Woman's biggest foes or whatever. But obviously this is not DC. Um, but yeah, she sort of plays like sort of she plays Cersei, and just like the way she acts in those scenes is very, very commanding. Like especially like the scenes where, she's meeting with the knights or whatever, not the knights, but Odysseus's crew, and turning them into pigs. It's like that is like not only is like good body horror, like holy shit, but just like the way she sort of like has this like eerie presence about her, and justifiably so, because she probably like stands a little bit on like a moral grounds here, where like yeah, these dudes like they're pigs, they like go in, they kill people, and like you kind of like get the gist about like her character pretty quickly, and just how she really like you almost sort of side with her in some cases, because like the journey that Odysseus is going on is not necessarily a good journey. It's fucking war. But it's kind of like how they're all sort of saying like yeah, you must sort of pay for your debts in some cases. And yeah, she really has like a lot of command in those scenes. It's really great.
Yeah, that entire sequence further convinced me that Nolan would make an incredible horror film. Just the the pace and the tone of it, and the fact that it's all practical too. Obviously, being a Chris Nolan film, all the not all, but there is an emphasis on practical effects and actually doing things in camera, and just the makeup and the transitioning of how she's essentially forming the pig's face out of the human as if it were a ball of clay was genuinely disturbing, and it looked like very believable. I genuinely couldn't believe it. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is really uncomfortable to sit through. And the way Morton also plays it too, she comes off as very very unassuming, almost like a classic witch in like a fairy tale in that way. Just sort of like, oh, it's comforting in here. Like you men coming from the war, like come in, have some food, sort of thing. But then, like obviously, she has a disdain for the soldier and the fact that they just invade and destroy and pillage, basically. So it's sort of deconstructing once again the male ego, essentially. And I know there were like memes about this. The Odyssey already has gave birth to a lot of memes, but people were comparing that scene to the what's it, Sabrina Carpenter song "Manchild." She's like, "Hey man," and it just cuts to a pig. That's literally what it was, and I was thinking about that too.
Oh yeah, I,
So,
I I can't wait once that gets on YouTube, and like we see that edit, like
oh, for sure,
be a
yeah,
life force in the like meme community.
yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah.
Um,
We should also talk about the Trojan horse scene
oh
too,
yeah, yeah.
which was the prologue originally when they re-released One Battle After Another and Sinners. That was like an abridged prologue
Hmm.
that was shown, but the actual sequence in it of itself is way longer and just genuinely epic too. Just the rhythm and the pace, and I love how it emphasizes the scale in that
Hmm.
scene. Like particularly in that scene, the whole film has incredible scale, but something about the way that the horse comes in, like when they're pulling it from the beach into the village too. You really sense how like big it is, and then when Matt Damon or Odysseus and his men come out, and then they're just like slashing everybody and just killing all the soldiers. It's really just awesome, the choreography in that scene too. And we didn't even mention Ludwig Göransson's score, who will probably win a fourth Oscar for this film, if I'm being totally honest. Just the the constant percussion of that scene just increasing and increasing really added to the tension. And Göransson's score overall carries a lot of the mythic quality of this film. In a similar vein to Oppenheimer, it's so omnipresent throughout the Odyssey, where it almost, I know some people mock, it's like, oh, it's just like trailer music essentially that's played over dialogue scenes. But in this case, because the score is so unique, it really helps. It would be one thing if it were a more modernist score, then it would just be distracting. But the instruments that are used, the tone of it, it feels very otherworldly, like a new. It's an old sound, but for us in the modern day, it's a new sound because we're so used to the traditional, for lack of better words, modernist sounding music, even going back to traditional classical scores. So it's a nice contrast compared to what we would expect from a big epic where it's just the emphasis on the orchestra, but here it's a lot of like flutes and horns, I think, and even just metallic percussion, I guess,
Oh
for
yeah,
lack of better
yeah.
words.
Especially
So
like sort of how they fit in like the sound effect of the bow that Odysseus uses, and it's like a guitar string, just like one single guitar string, and it fits so well. Like it doesn't feel like that it's out of place at all. Um, and it's like, because the thing I like about Goranson is like his scores really fit in with the setting of the film. So like it really just shows how versatile he has come. Like it just shows how versatile he is as a composer. He's come a long way from like producing the music for Community and working with Childish Gambino. Like if you told me that the guy who created the temp music for Community was gonna be like a 3-time, potentially 4-time Academy Award winner, like I would have like not believed you. It's fucking insane. Like you don't expect it at all. But yeah, like it's really, really good score. Like really impressive. But yeah, like those action scenes, like they work so well. I mean, I guess like my favorite scene, oddly enough, was it was after uh they pillaged the sheep over like the sheep of Apollo. And you kind of get like Zeus's whole wrath and like how he sort of splits the boat in half and kills the rest of like Odysseus's crew. Like it's not really a spoiler. This has been known. But it's but the way that scene worked, like the lighting, like really like shined, like because for one, you can like say it looks like it's shot on like a sound stage, which I mean, yeah, fair, it probably was. But it sort of like brings in the effect of like like you're sitting in a tent like in the wilderness somewhere, and it's like a really like gripping storm that's happening, and like just the way that lightning flashes, like it comes off really realistic. Um, like and that it's just like it's a lighting effect. Like it's a really good lighting effect, and just how it's all portrayed. And it's like you're feeling just as lost as the characters are, and intentionally so. It's not like it's like shittily shot or whatever, but you actually get a gist about you know just like that feeling of just like anguish and just like separation. It really works in that scene. So I was like, yeah, that was really freaking cool. Just a really good use of like sort of the soundstage effects you would see back in like the 1950s, but no one somehow like made it work. It's just really, it was like damn near perfect right there.
yeah, that the entire Cyclops scene was just another just phenomenal sequence. It's pretty early on too. I was surprised. I thought it would be a little more towards the second act, but that's only like the beginning basically. And apparently the actual effect of the Cyclops was primarily practical. I want to say I'm sure there were some touch ups like digitally,
Oh yeah,
but
they're probably
the fact that's but the fact that it's primarily in camera is very impressive. And just I don't know how they were able to do the like the, I guess, forced perspective almost, because it would have to, even if it's to scale, it can't be like entirely the same. There had to be some trickery, but whatever they did, it was super convincing.
Oh yeah, and
And
same thing with like
yeah.
what the Lystri Gonians, when they're like, in that giant battle, like that was like
Mm-hmm.
those practical effects like worked so well. So, but I guess I looked into it, at least with the like Shigonian scene. And apparently like they used like stunt doubles who were like 5'3" or whatever. Um, and
Oh.
they were women too.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if this is true, so like, you can look it up yourself, but like but yeah, apparently like that poster shot, like I guess that's a stunt double right there.
That
But
makes sense.
but like holy shit, is that a stunt double like fucking fit? It's crazy. But yeah, it's like the VFX really worked very well. It's really impressive just on how it all sort of came together. Like I just never felt like there was anything out of like the realm of like believability. I guess like the closest you could say is maybe just the scene with the Skyla, but even then there's still like a level there that makes you like believe all that. So I think, Nolan really accomplished a lot there. Um, but yeah, I guess I do want to go back to Matt Damon a little bit because I know like you mentioned about like his performance sort of, and this has always been an issue with me and Matt Damon. it,
Personally.
it I don't know. I don't know. I am used to like the like when Kimmel was funny, the Matt Damon jokes he would be making. But um, but like I always had like an odd relationship with Matt Damon as an actor because I've know he is a good actor, but it's like half the time I just don't. Just like times where I just can't really believe his characters that much. Um, like yeah, Good Will Hunting, sure. Like he's works in that film, Jason Bourne, sure. Um, but like there's just times where it's like, Matt Damon just really comes off like, just like, a little too I don't know what it is. Like it's a weird thing with me and Matt Damon. It's like people like say, "Oh, I can't see like a role with Leonardo DiCaprio in a movie because like you can't help but see the performance, not the character." Which people got to take account that it's a different type of like acting where you got your character actors that will completely like envelop these type of characters, or the method actors like Edward Norton or Daniel Day Lewis that would go full heartedly into a role and just like completely disappear into it. Then you have like the ones like the Hollywood stars, like like what you can't really say. There's like a Tom Cruise role where you can't see Tom Cruise. I mean, obviously Digger hasn't come out yet, but it's the basis, and Matt Damon has always sort of been that way for me. Where yeah, he's a good actor, but like I don't know if it's like completely like Academy Award worthy or something where it's like he really intrigues me just from a performance standpoint. But I'm gonna be honest, like I think him as Odysseus is probably his best performance. Like it's weird to say because I know like there's a lot of people that love Matt Damon. But it's like I said, I have an odd relationship with just the level of actor Matt Damon is. I mean, he works in like roles of Ocean's 11 and The Martian, but I never seen him like fully transform into a role like Odysseus. Because he sort of like plays him in a way that is grounded, so sort of like a maybe a little bit of like an Eastwood inspiration there, where he sort of comes off like a little stoic, but there's like a way he sort of like presents like that level of regret that he has in the trauma. Because the thing about this version of Odysseus, this one's less about hubris and more or less just about the effect that his hubris had during the Battle of Troy. And sort of like the trauma he's sort of dealing with and trying to repress. Um, and so I think there is like a level there that really works with Damon's acting because Damon really does a great job sort of presenting that level of regret and, not thinking that he's going to be able to like, be the same again after this entire journey. Um, and like there's like a lot of like really good scenes, like especially like in the third act where he's talking to Penelope through this like very like it's like a confessional you would see at a church. And kind of explaining, like through a different character, sort of like he sort of comes in disguised as a beggar, but he like sort of presents the story like how it's like emotionally impacting him in some cases and just sort of seeing the regret on his face and just the tears run down his eyes. It's like, yeah, this is purely Damon's best performance. I mean, I know like people know him for like The Martian, Oceans, and Good Will Hunting, which yeah, he's good in those movies. Like you're not saying he isn't, but it's just a personal thing. But I think he really does a great job. Like he really actually astounded me when he played this character. Like I think it really worked. And my God, like you could tell the workout the man went through. Like those fucking arms, bro. Like those things are boulders. It's crazy.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that impressed me with Damon primarily came towards that third act when he finally returns back to Ithaca. When he's basically like nobody realizes that it's Odysseus, which a part of me was slightly confused because I get that he was gone for a while, but it's like, wouldn't you still recognize that it was him? But I don't know. That was just kind of that's a nitpicky thing. Like obviously, I know John Leguizamo can't because his character is blind, but wouldn't he recognize the voice? He wasn't really doing much different with his voice, but regardless, that entire scene when he's confessing to Penelope, but also to just something that I really appreciate about Damon is he actually does a very good job in this film, particularly with his eyes without saying anything. It communicates quite a lot, just the fear or the like even in contrast to the Trojan War, just the energy and the strategy sort of that goes on just in his eyes. But the one that sold me was how we didn't mention Zendaya's character, Athena, who is basically kind of comes alongside Odysseus at key points, sort of as like this. It's almost like a figment of his imagination early on, and where she just sort of like materializes. But then it's later revealed that basically, not that it is actually Athena, but there was another girl during the Trojan War that basically looked like her. So Athena essentially haunts Odysseus throughout the film, which adds this very unique sense of moral complexity that he's like dealt with and has to like live with for the rest of his life. And just all the conversations and glances, it's like his inner self-conscious sort of bringing that out of him. And yeah, I think that was the best part of his performance overall. It was more just, I don't know, like when he talks, because maybe Matt Damon has a very distinct voice too, in my opinion. Like when if I were to just like close my eyes and listen to him talk or to act in a movie, like I could probably point. I was like, oh yeah, that's him, and it sort of carries that here to a degree. But I don't know, just when it's the quieter scenes worked a lot surprisingly better, which I didn't expect from him.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it definitely like showed like that he's certainly one of the better actors working today. I mean, yeah, like people like making fun of the Damon Affleck duo in some respects, but if the reasons why they're good actors, very talented in front of the camera and behind the camera. So like you can't really like deny just the level of talent that a lot of these actors displayed. I guess like you know I guess just like things that make a lot of sense because like the thing is that initially, like, these performances all come off like a different caliber where they fit within the roles, but it seems like the actors are sort of doing their own thing. Like, sort of like, I mean, it's gonna be an odd example, but sort of like what Coppola was trying to get the actors in Megalopolis to do, um, where like, you know, yeah, just do whatever, do what you want. Shia LaBeouf, just do the weirdest shit, or whatever. Um, but obviously, you know, there was not much control with like how those characters were reacting to one another in that film. But here you could at least say like the characters, like the caliber of acting is sort of working with the like engagement. So like, you know, like Pattinson's like level of performance works very well with Hathaway's level of performance, and you know Bernthal's performance. You know, it's most of the time like Bernthal sort of acts like this, you know, very rugged, tough guy, dude, bro, sort of, and like Lupita Nyong'o, like obviously Academy Award winning actress, but you know. Like his like level of like performance worked really well with Nyong'o's like level of performance. So like all these actors really fit in pretty well with one another. I mean, even like Tom Holland, like, you know, I know I said like, yeah, there's times where he could feel out of place because his level of acting is so different from everybody else's in this film. But you know, even then, like there's like what this really good scene before they enter in the castle where you know he figures out like, oh yeah, yeah, you're Odysseus or whatever, and it actually works very well. Like it actually doesn't come off like very corny, you know. Um, so like yeah, the acting works very well. Um, so I think, I mean, I don't know. I guess like I don't know. I mean, I think if you were to pick out weak links, I mean, I know like I said it's Holland, but you know, oddly enough, like Charlie Theron in this film was a little odd,
Her
but
role was a bit minimal, though. To be
yeah.
fair,
And then like Mia Goth and Logan Marshall Green were sort of subjected to side roles. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess like it's a big enough opportunity to like be in something like the Odyssey. So like you know, take advantage. You know, but yeah, it's insane. Like you know, it's a very stacked cast. Um, I guess like a thing I guess I do want to talk about is just sort of how you know the reactions to this film um because let's face it there are some pretty batshit reactions that just don't make a lot of sense because obviously these are people that are haven't seen the film, but I think it mainly centers around Elliot Page in this film. And now for those who don't know, Elliot Page used to go by his dead name, or their dead name, Ellen Page, who's been known for Juno and Inception. Yeah, so like you know, obviously really talented, and you know has since transitioned into a man. Um, but obviously there's a lot of people that are like you know, having heavy criticisms of her, mainly those that are, you know, on the really far right of the political spectrum. You know, sort of, you know, like saying like, oh, this isn't how, you know, Achilles
it's
should
not
be,
accurate.
and it's like,
He's not even
nah,
Achilles. That's
not
the
even
funny thing.
Achilles. It's
He's
like,
Xenon.
yeah, it's Xenon. It's a original character, and
Is he?
yeah, yeah. He's not in Homer's original poem. Actually, let me read that again. So Sinon is was not in Homer's original poem, but
Oh,
he was borrowed from like another story called the Aeneid, which is another story about Aeneas, who like you know fled from the fall of Troy. Um, so like yeah, there, you know, all these Greek stories somehow connect one way or another. But yeah, so like people are like sort of criticizing or you know or doom, you know, or those like grifters on Twitter or whatever criticizing the use of the casting, and it's like to be honest, like for one, get a life. you know, just because somebody has something they want to do with their body does not mean you need to complain about it. And two, actually watch the film before you know that this character is not Achilles. Um, very, very dumb. But like, yeah, like, I know this was like a very one of the few reactions, but I think there's like a lot of people that have like been criticizing that, like Elon saying he's going to create an AI version of the Odyssey. It's fucking stupid.
Did he say it was going to be like better or something?
I assume that's what he's going for.
That's what he wants. Yeah, I'm sure he'll do that. I'm sure it'll be better.
Yeah, people could read into AI slot pretty quickly, guys. Well, it's going to be more historically accurate. Technically, like the Odyssey, like thing to take into account about the Odyssey. No, we said it in the beginning too. It's like the Odyssey is a template for a lot of stories. So initially, like just a lot of stories that are taken from the Odyssey. So having a completely accurate representation of the Odyssey, I wouldn't say is impossible, but in film form, it makes a lot of sense for it to be presented this way. Because kind of like I was going back to earlier with the performances and how each are sort of bringing their own flavor to it. Like it's very much so like a stage show in some cases. Where that's kind of where I felt like Nolan got a lot of the inspiration because like the colorblind casting, like it works. It works. And plus, do people know that the greatest basketball player on the planet right now is from Greece, and he is Nigerian Greek? Like, come on. Like, it's crazy, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about the casting, of course, people were saying like, "Oh, this is woke," and all that. Like the woke mob is coming back, and like I said, I've said it like 3 times, but I will always say like this is the Odyssey didn't happen. It's not what unlike what most people are led to believe, this did not happen in our world history. It's the ultimate work of fiction. So by all accounts, if you are adapting a film that has been the foundation for literally every type of story followed, you have, if anything, the most freedom to do whatever, honestly. If you really wanted to, you could have set it in outer space or something. Like
That's 2001.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's like
it's
crazy.
It honestly does, like the casting doesn't bother me at all, to tell you the truth, because it's clear that Nolan is not trying to, he's not making a documentary because there's nothing to document because it's not real. So it's just absurd that obviously these conversations will probably never die, just no matter what the film is. But the fact that it took such a big part of the conversation leading up to the film, I thought was kind of insane. But not only just that, but kind of what we were talking about with like the accents too, or people talking about like, oh, the armor isn't accurate too. It's just like, what are we doing here? Like, movies are an escape from reality. It's meant to be entertainment. Like this is the same. Like people were talking about the same thing with Gladiator 2, how, oh, it's not realistic that he's fighting sharks and lions or like rhinos. Yeah, rhinos in the Colosseum. It's like, it's a movie. It's not, it's meant to be like fun and wacky and weird. And the Odyssey, when you break it down based on what we see here, is a weird story. There's weird creatures, there's weird occurrences, there's gods and goddesses and witches and sirens and like it's a big hodgepodge of fantastical elements. So if you're not trying to make it, if you want to make it grounded, like you can't remove that sense of fantasy out of it. It has to be, if you want to be accurate, you should dive more into that and embrace the freedom that you have when it comes to the casting, which I appreciate Nolan for doing, and especially because everyone's good too. Like Elliot Page actually had some of the most effective scenes in the film, especially when his character is like resurrected from the dead. And that whole scene, his like monologue, it was really, really impressive. And just the direction and the tone of that was really cool. So yeah, like I'm not surprised that people are pissed off about the casting, honestly, just because that's the world we live in now. But yeah, it's just like, watch watch the movie first before you make that judgment. Like if you can't be bothered to get the character's name right, then you're doing something wrong there.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
there's
very much
just
so.
such bad faith.
I mean, it's like, I mean, out of the things that could be really uncontroversial or quote unquote like uncontroversial or controversial, whatever, they chose the Odyssey out of everything. And the thing is, like, the Odyssey like has been through many iterations through different times and in like different forms. Like, because what we when we go on the stage, like we don't freak out about there being a black version of Odysseus, I mean, it's like the thing is like what there's probably some really good fucking actors that could play Odysseus that are white and black and like any type of like skin tone. So we are so hung up on this, or not we, but certain
Yeah,
certain people that
people.
have never like left Twitter. Which I gotta say, it's not like all people on the right. It's like just those very few people that are just trying to make people freak out, like Matt Walsh or whatever. Which it's kind of funny that Ben Shapiro liked this film. um,
Yeah, that was the biggest surprise of all. Did he give it like a 9 out of 10 or
yeah,
something?
yeah, I think he did. And it's kind of funny where it's like, but Ben Shapiro said he didn't like he didn't like One Battle After Another, despite the fact he like praised a lot of like the way the movie was told. It's like, yeah, you clearly have an agenda. Like he actually gave it a good score, but it's like, why are we at a point right now where it's like we're arguing about a story that has been adapted and you know used in different ways throughout human history. There's been many versions of the Odyssey, like for a long, long, long time. So it's like it's crazy. It's really crazy. I mean, they gotta get their clicks. They gotta get people mad. you know, but it's like we have better things to worry about.
Yeah, I if anything, what I was more surprised about was just the not the casting, but just how it was more from the historians. They're just like, oh, the armor isn't right, the boats aren't right, like all that. It's like this is a continual trend that we see with these types of historical films now, and I honestly don't understand. Like it's deliberately anachronistic. But it's like, why can't you just infer that maybe that's sort of the vibe and tone that Nolan was going for? Like that before the casting, I remember the very first image was of Odysseus, sort of, it was like a side profile. And then immediately people were like, oh, the helmet isn't right. And it was thinking like, why are we having this conversation now? And I think that also sort of built up this false impression that the Odyssey was a real thing, but it wasn't. It didn't happen. So I don't know. I find that very interesting. I also found it amusing that people were comparing Benny Safdie's character. I apologize for mispronouncing all of these names, by the way. Agamemnon.
Yeah,
They compared
it's like
his
Agamemnon. It's
Agamemnon.
like you have to really hit the M and the N at the same time.
Yeah,
Greeks are
like
weird,
people.
bro.
Yeah, people were comparing his armor to the bat suit, like the Christian Bale Batman armor, which I thought was kind of funny.
Yeah. I don't
So
know. And the thing is, you also got to realize it's for entertainment. I mean, I think initially, generally speaking, a lot of this stuff is very speculative. So like you can never really like get a good gist about at this like say this stuff did happen or whatever. Like you don't know like if they would have actually wore this stuff and the thing is like no one's like done his homework on it. I'm sure. I mean he's not. I mean what the dude like really invented a new piece of visual effects for Interstellar just to get the science right on the black holes. So it's like, he's probably not like just turning a blind eye to like, the accuracies of it because he's purely taking advantage of like the speculative nature of this history. Like as people do got to realize like there's a lot of history that is still up to speculation. Even back in like the Bronze Age and the stuff like BCE or whatever. It's like, all that's speculative. So I don't really have like an issue with this um where they're able to like, use like stuff that okay, it's used in like Vikings and shit. It's like I don't mind it. It works. It works very well. So, but
It's funny we introduced this earlier, but we didn't really talk about the cinematography all that much. Yeah, Hoyt Van Hoytema,
yeah,
like I said, entirely shot with IMAX cameras. The first for a narrative Hollywood feature, because obviously we've had those documentaries where they couldn't go past like 40 minutes or something. Yeah, the Odyssey is nearly 3 hours. Every single frame is an IMAX, which is absolutely astonishing that they were able to pull it off. One thing that I found interesting, though, is the fact that the cinematography, which is very, very good, it has a different flow to it because for those who don't know about the IMAX film technology, these cameras, like I said, are massive, they're loud, and they can't, there's not a lot of film that can go through them. I think it's approximately like 2 to 3 minutes. So you literally can't go over that for a shot. So the Odyssey really doesn't have many long shots. It's a lot of quick cutting, especially in the dialogue scenes where it's like A angle, B angle, A angle, B angle. And very few of those scenes are like oneers. There was one that stood out where it was Anne Hathaway and Robert Pattinson. It's this like slow zoom while they're behind like a curtain. And that was the one that really stood out. But overall, it's very quick. And in a way, I struggle to say it's bad because obviously the cinematography is not bad at all, but it has a very different feel compared to Nolan's other films where there is such an emphasis on sort of like slower, longer takes, whereas here it's a lot of cutting in this 3 hour film. And I would be curious to see if someone is not as familiar, if they were to watch it in a non-IMAX format, how would they feel about that? Would they say like, oh, there's too many cuts? Because that's something that's like mocked in films, especially action ones, where they're not letting the scene breathe. It's just they're letting it cut because in this case it's a necessity, which is an interesting where above all else, the Odyssey is one of the only films where the film format took major precedence over everything else because the film can't be over 3 hours long because the projectors can't go over that amount of time. They were limited on how long every scene or shot could be based on the technology. So not to say that it was a weight against the film, but it's interesting to see that we're at a point now. And if the Odyssey obviously was successful, that more films will probably be shot entirely in IMAX. What does the future hold then for the way these films are shot?
yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of innovation that has been made with IMAX in recent years. Because it started in the late '90s, and ever since, like we've been seeing a lot of IMAX theaters pop up, and especially like big blockbusters sort of take advantage of the format, even if like even if the film itself isn't shot within that format, oddly enough. So like there were times where it's like what you're watching Mission Impossible, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's like some scenes that were shot on IMAX cameras, but some scenes that weren't. And so now we're getting to a point where almost everything that we like the Odyssey and Dune Part 3 are all being shot on IMAX film. And it is going to be interesting on how that's going to go, especially for the analog film format, because I mean, I love going out to see films in like analog, because there is such a odd touch, like it feels like it's a personal touch to it, um, like it's something where like it feels very something you're watching is going to be pretty historic or in some respects. So I really like seeing the film grain and sometimes the bit of the lines going down the film print. So I really like seeing stuff in analog film, and I think Nolan's been a very big contributor to that. Because I think with Oppenheimer, he very much so like continued on that streak where he, was wanting to include more analog stuff. And the thing is, like, the thing about Nolan films is like they're always big. Like there's just a scale to his stories and to these worlds that he creates. But there's gonna be like remasters and re-releases of his like previous films in analog formats, which is very awesome. I'm very happy to see that. Um, so I guess the hope is like when we see, so I think hopefully it is going to help us hit a renaissance of like, seeing analog film back into the digital age, and especially the advancements being made with the IMAX cameras. Like apparently they had to, it's something I did learn because I was shooting a BTS suit, a BTS shoot or whatever. And, I had old camera gear. So they were like old DSLRs and, thing to know about like behind the scenes photography and videography is like you cannot run your shutter while the camera's rolling. Otherwise, it ruins the take, it wastes money, and then all of a sudden you're there for a long day, or you're gonna get kicked out. And the thing that and so I had to use this thing called a blimp, where it's like a sort of a buffer for the sound, and it's like a giant it's like a giant case or whatever that you like put a camera in, so you don't hear the sound of the shutter at all. So it's very interesting. I mean, luckily now we're in the mirrorless camera age, so I didn't have to worry about that. Don't have to worry much about that now since I got new mirrorless stuff. But how I'm using this example is like with the Odyssey, they had to use like a blimp to cover the sound of the film rolling or like
Yeah.
shooting, and because IMAX cameras are very loud. So, and since with a lot of the scenes were shot like, in that environment, they had to put a blimp on it so that way the sound had the buffers. You don't end up hearing the film sound while you're recording sound. But as you know, I find it to be pretty fascinating. So like no one's obviously trying to make a lot of advancements in this format, which is great. Very happy for that. Obviously, I wish it was much more affordable. Um, like, more affordable and not dropping like concert tickets, you know. But I'm just like hoping that, I'm glad that we're seeing these level of advancements happen. But I don't know. I mean, I think the format like didn't really deter me from the film because I think it really helped expand the world a lot, and there's like reasons why it needs to be seen in like these formats. But I don't know. I think it's still could. I mean, it's gonna be interesting if I do see in like a standardized format, because I know there's like people that have been complaining about potential like parts of the film getting cut off. Um, but you just have to check and see. You just have to see what you will get from it. Because like obviously IMAX is a completely different type of format, and like we've been seeing a lot of ways of how people can watch IMAX films on their TV. So I don't hopefully it doesn't make too much of a difference, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, and it is also a shame that, to my knowledge, the Odyssey will not be seen in its full frame IMAX ratio when it comes out on digital and Blu-ray, which I think that's a genuine shame. I wish there was a way to see that, especially because not there's only 41 theaters in the entire world that are capable of doing the IMAX 70 millimeter version, which by all accounts is the definitive way to see it more than ever because it was shot entirely on the format. So the fact that we can't even get that at home is a bummer. Another thing too is the fact that I admire the fact that it was all shot entirely in IMAX, but unfortunately the sound mixing was not the best. Admittedly, it wasn't as bad as Tenet, but I think it's a bit more. What was a little frustrating is the fact that since the Odyssey is set in ancient Greece, a lot of the names and dialect are a bit more historical and older. So the fact that sometimes you can't hear the conversations or like who's speaking to who gets a little confusing at points. And as obviously, this is a more dialogue focused film. It's not the worst considering the fact that it was shot entirely on the format. I was expecting it to be a, li- a little. I wouldn't say I wasn't say expecting to be worse, but yeah, it was still a bit of a problem overall, which is a shame because in Oppenheimer it wasn't. I actually thought Oppenheimer was a significant improvement compared to Nolan's previous sound mixing, but he kind of took a step back on
Yeah,
this.
it's been interesting to like hear people clearly complain about the sound mixes and like Nolan's recent works. Which I mean, Tenet's probably like the best example of it not working so well. Just because Tenet has like it's so obvious in Tenet, and people are like, oh, you don't hear the dialogue anyway. It's like I don't know, it's still pretty like important dialogue, and plus just because like just because it's not just because you think it's meaningless dialogue does not necessarily mean it shouldn't be mixed properly mixed
Yeah,
this way. It's like you still just a level of like sound mixing that needs to work where you need to have your be able to hear what's going on, but obviously the mix needs to work. Otherwise, there's going to be some noises that aren't going to be like resonating that well. With the Odyssey, I guess I was sort of in the middle because there's a lot of points where the mixing actually did work for me. Like I think especially the scenes like with the sirens and the Skyla or whatever. Like I do like how the mixes worked in those scenes, and even like the scene at Troy, like there's a lot of points where they work. So I think in the action scenes themselves, they work pretty fine. I think there are points like during the dialogue scenes where they could have found a way to make the music just a little less than the dialogue. And it's just only by a few decibels, not like a crazy amount, but there's like points where I feel like it was really, trying to overshadow the dialogue. Like we know we want to feel the epic nature of the score, but I think there could have been ways to like mix that a little bit better. Um, like it's something. It's like I know it's been a trend for a lot of people, like whether they like love or hate Nolan's version of editing. But I think I think there's a lot of cases where it could have like been better in terms of just how everything was mixed together. I mean, it worked in like some scenes where it worked was like the scenes with Cersei where she's turning the soldiers into pigs, and you get those eerie sounds. Like the sound effects really work in that scene, so the sound design felt like the sound design felt well mixed there. But there's like some scenes with just dialogue that just really don't work. I think the only scene that did work dialogue wise was, like I said, the confessional level, like the confessional scene in the third act. So I think it works in that way. But
yeah, it's not like terrible though, but it is just a continual problem. And unfortunately, at this point, you do expect a Chris Nolan film to not have perfect sound mixing. At this rate, it's kind of a bit of a meme. But hopefully for the next, I'm sure whatever IMAX and Nolan cook up for his next film, they have to address the sound. There has to be a way to like improve upon it, and I'm sure they will because being this was the first time it was entirely IMAX. I'm sure there were some kinks they had to work out. So I'm sure they'll get it better the next time. At least I hope they do. The it does work a lot for the action though. Like when there's no one talking, like especially in like the final scene when Odysseus puts the bow together and like that whole scene, the choreography was just phenomenal. Like people were in awe when the he shoots the bow and then I forget the character, but the one of the suitors, he's like, "You're Odysseus," and then he's just like shot in the neck.
oh
And
yeah,
people cheered.
Polybus, yeah, played by Corey
Yeah,
Hawkins. Yeah, it's a really good scene. I just like it does fit in very well, with, like sort of the myth of it all with the Odysseus character, like like the suitors sort of like thinking like, oh, does this guy even exist at all, or is he even alive? And it's like it's like a legend coming to life. It's really cool on how that whole scene is just portrayed. Um, so yeah, I found that to be really smart, just how Nolan sort of like let that work. I guess like the thing I've been noticing a lot with like Nolan like post I guess you could say post Tenet because Oppenheimer and obviously the Odyssey are his most recent, but he I think he must be taking into account like how there are points where like the characters, like generally speaking, in most Nolan films, um, the film is not really reliant on characters as it is on story and plot. And I think there's like a very interesting dilemma that Nolan's sort of using where, you're sort of, I guess like I'm sort of quoting Karsten Runquist a little bit in his review, but it's something like where Nolan's finding the emotionality a little bit with these characters. Because all things considered, like, outside of like Odysseus, Penelope, like, there's a lot of cases where you could consider like some of these characters to be rather stoic, but there you do sort of feel a lot of like the emotion um with these characters. And so like just like a point where these characters don't feel like they're at arm's length anymore like they were while watching Tenet or you know something like Insomnia or Dark Knight Rises. Like it doesn't feel like we're at arm's length anymore. I think Nolan's really finally gotten a grip on writing characters that we actually like feel for. Like it's not just these stoic type of archetypes. It actually feels like like damn, like yeah, these people are actually going through stuff here. And so I find that like to be a very like promising trend that has actually been going pretty like upward in terms of Nolan's like films so far, in terms of dealing with like main characters sort of dealing with like trauma and regret. And it could also be like a lot of like his sort of feelings in the world right now, where like everything is like going to shit in some cases, but I think Nolan's been really really sort of letting that narrative voice like kind of come through a little bit in a way that is actually emotionally engaging. So I think there is like, especially for the Odysseus character, like he's sort of presenting this level of like regret and trauma, and just sort of like trying to like forget about like all these like very shitty things he's done, but obviously still paying the price for it along the way. Like it really is gripping. Like, I think without, Nolan, Damon, and, this level of writing in terms of Odysseus's character, like, there's a way to really, I don't think the film would have, like, worked quite as well on an emotional level. So I think Nolan's really finally getting the emotional level down pretty well.
Yeah, it's interesting how both weirdly the Odyssey and Oppenheimer make for really good companion pieces, despite them exploring quite literally opposite topics. But they're both really character studies about a protagonist's psychology, but also the impact that like one decision has that changes the course of time. Like we see that obviously in Oppenheimer with the creation of the atomic bomb, but here it's really like the outcome of the Trojan War, essentially, and how the not only just the journey that led up to it, but also its impact and how that's being perceived changes everything for civilizations, and sort of that pressure and regret too that comes along with making a decision like that, and how get one one's own hubris sort of gets the best of him in that way, and which is really interesting because if we like chronicled Nolan's filmography too, kind of like we were saying, I feel like post Interstellar he went through like two different eras, because Dunkirk is incredibly like experiential, and even Tenet to some degree, even though that tried to be more about the sort of mythology, but at the end of the day it was a big spectacle, almost like his take on a James Bond film. But then he went into this more introspective, internalized drama with the characters in different ways that I don't know. It's like it's interesting how he's able to pull that off with a historical drama, but then taking that and putting it into a fantasy, epic poem setting too. It shows the versatility. So I'm not sure what he would do next to like almost make an unofficial trilogy out of that, but it would be interesting to see him explore another type of genre storytelling with those themes in mind.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, 'cause I think like, there's been a big criticism of Nolan for like years when it comes to just sort of presenting these characters in a way that like we don't necessarily like resonate with them as we resonate with what they're doing or like how they're experiencing these things. Like, all things considered outside of like DiCaprio's character, it's like we don't really feel much for the characters in Inception. Um so it's like, we're still feeling it's like it sort of felt like, Nolan trying to figure out the emotionality of his characters, but not necessarily like getting the idea of like how to, make it work into like a humanistic way. Um so I think it works very like well with Oppenheimer and the Odyssey, where you're able to like get the gist about these characters and just how focused we are on them. Because I think there's just a way like he is able to portray that visually, without having like the need for like the very philosophical dialogue that we always associate with him. So I think he really has gotten down on how to really let these characters sort of connect in a way that doesn't feel like they're at arm's length. So think I think it's something that's very commendable, especially for like a director that has been so enveloped in his style for years. I mean, yeah, this film is still too like it still has the reverse level storytelling that has been present in many of his films. Where it's like it sort of ends in the middle a little bit, but it it works very well. I think it's something that the style actually has evolved a little bit where no one's able to figure out the emotionality of the characters without, trying to go like full on like, you know, plot focused. I think a little more character focus I think actually helped him in this case. So um yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Is there anything else to add?
I don't know. It's how long have we been talking? Hold on, let me look. Oh, it's been about an hour 44. I think we started talking about the Odyssey around the 20-minute mark. So we have officially like met the runtime of Disney's Dumbo.
Yeah.
I think that's less, oddly enough.
It probably is, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, there's not very much else to add. I guess if we could get into final thoughts real quick. I think yeah, I really enjoyed this. I don't know where necessarily this will go in terms of Nolan's overall filmography. Just because, yeah, there are issues, for sure. I think it does start on some shaky ground, in the beginning, but then as the story goes along, it gets better and, the intentions feel a little more clear. And yeah, it's nothing like it right now. I know we said it a lot when it comes to like these, major blockbusters that have come out, like Project Hail Mary or Sinners from last year. But it seems like we're getting to a point where it's like, Nolan's just mastered the art of the blockbuster, but using that art in a way where it's something meaningful. It isn't just like you know the scenery or whatever. And Nolan was able to do that with a story that obviously is foundational to storytelling in general. And so it's awesome to see that there is a film like The Odyssey in theaters. if you can, try to catch it in 70 millimeter IMAX as it was intended. But I know those screenings are sold out right now. It's oh my god, it's crazy. Like people going crazy for a premium format like this is insane. But yeah, try to go see it. It's worth it. Definitely in a theater. For sure. It's what the big screen was made for. And yeah, I probably think about maybe a high 8, low 9 out of 10 is probably where I put it. But yeah, it's truly exceptional.
Yeah, it's so cool that we even have a movie like this out today. The fact that Nolan was given $250 million to adapt the Odyssey with a basically full creative control. So yeah, we're living in a good time for cinema when we get something like this. Even though people say like, oh, movies are dying, which is like absolutely not true, but we having something like this is really special. And like like what Daniel said, highly recommend seeing it in the IMAX 70 millimeter format if you're able to. I'm sure they're going to extend the run too, but I don't know. I think they're sold out still, even like 5 weekends in at this rate. So it's insane. You know what they should do? They should build more IMAX theaters and build more projectors. But you know, I hope that this is like officially the sign. It's like, okay, we need more places for people to see this in the intended format. So hopefully that's the case. But film overall is really great. It's epic. It's an epic story conveyed in an epic manner, and it might not have, sometimes it can struggle to find its footing, but overall what it builds up to is something that's incredibly satisfying. There's so many memorable sequences and scenes, and the technical elements of the film are just superb. So yeah, it's personally not my favorite Nolan. There's plenty of Nolan films that I prefer over this one, but still doesn't change the fact that The Odyssey, it's a really great movie and will likely be in the conversation coming in the award season for among the best. So I'm going to give it a high 8 out of 10. That's where I feel comfortable with.
See it in Infinity Vision. Well, I don't know. Or Nolan Vision, you know?
Nolan Vision.
Nolan Vision.
It's just IMAX.
70 millimeter IMAX exclusively. Just put his name on it. He's making them bank. He's making bank with it, you know? Like I mean, it's a renaissance of IMAX. We love it. Except it
totally
costs a lot of money, but it's awesome. Time for my rec. The reason we chose two films is because we knew this was going to be an episode of Epics initially. It's because, like we already said, we're already at an hour 50 right now. In terms of, and we just talked about the Odyssey. But this film is different, very, very different, considered to be rather influential in terms of international art house cinema. And it's from a filmmaker who we heard great things about, but has been a major blind spot in our film watching. And that has been Andrei Tarkovsky, from Russia, Soviet Russia. And he's, I don't know, it's like, dude is very influential in that era of filmmaking. And it was this film, I think, is considered to be probably his best, if I'm not mistaken. I know there's probably a lot of others that probably could take that mantle the more I watch of this guy's filmography, depending on if I have the patience to get through them. Because if you look at a lot of his filmography, these films almost hit over 2.5 hours to 3 hours long. So the dude knows how to do his long takes. But I guess, yeah, we're going to talk about Stalker from 1979. And I guess we could sort of paint a picture a little bit, is that science fiction was fucking everywhere in the 70s. Of
Mhm.
course, you had Close Encounters of the Third Kind from Steven Spielberg, Star Wars from George Lucas. And so, obviously, in Western cinema, we've been getting a lot of it. And keep in mind, sci fi has existed for a long time in cinematic history. It started all the way, I believe, like 1940s, I believe. Um, but obviously hit a big boom after Star Wars came out. And I wouldn't say like Tarkovsky was inspired. I doubt he was. He may be, I don't know. But he like, he has mainly been like he had a film called Solaris, I
Mhm.
believe that's how you pronounce it. Um,
Solaris.
yeah. And that is sort of a response to sort of the science fiction genre in some cases. And this one sort of is too, but it's different. Like it's a very different type of film where you're in a utopia, but it's a utopia that it's almost so like it's so grounded in the real world, but it's so other worldly. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
very interesting in just how he approaches the genre here. Um, but yeah, I guess like before, we could probably just go into general thoughts.
Yeah, Tarkovsky was a blind spot for me also, mostly because I've just been intimidated by his works. I mean, all of his films are considered among the greatest of all time, especially for Soviet cinema. But yeah, the big thing about Tarkovsky is that thematically they're incredibly dense and philosophical. So it's hard to be in like the right mindset to watch a Tarkovsky film. But this is one that was been on the watch list for years. So, and I knew eventually I'd have to get around to it because it's one of the films to watch. And I knew like a little about it, but very like ridiculously vaguely. Like, but overall, like when I started watching it, I was like pretty sucked in pretty much immediately in the way it approaches science fiction. Kind of like what you said, this is a film that is very otherworldly, even in the more normalish settings, but it feels very grounded and believable. Just the way they approach the science fiction genre, but even like in terms of fantasy too. We didn't really discuss what the basic synopsis of the film was, but it's basically it is kind of like an Odyssey journey where there's the stalker, the titular stalker, guides these two other guys, a writer and a professor, into this mysterious area known as the Zone, basically, and they try to find a room that will essentially provide some sort of like clarity or like meaning and purpose in life. Like that's the very basic idea, but it's really more of an outlet to examining each of their philosophies and beliefs too. And it's primarily dialogue focused and just hearing these characters speak about their own not only beliefs but also just their psychology, the way they view the world, the way the world like almost influences their decisions is really fascinating. Like this is a very dense film overall, but it's one that will just keep it just keeps you thinking more and more. And even though the film it's came out in 1979, it feels odd, strangely timeless because of the philosophy. Because there have been like so many books and essays written about Stalker and just the interpretations overall. Like, what does the zone represent? What does the room represent? Who are these characters necessarily based on? Too. So there is this sense of meaningful and purposeful discussion that comes about with the film itself, and just overall the very idea of like human nature and human desire too. So yeah, I was really impressed with the film. I think I'll give it like a few more years till I rewatch it because it's one where it's like it's not to say I was never really like bored, but just because of how densely compact and also it is a decently long film too. It's like you need to be in the right mindset for it.
Yeah, like it took me a bit to like figure out how to approach this film when I watched it. Just because like, this is probably like the example of slow cinema, where it's a not like a genre of film, but it's like a type of film that very much relies on its pacing. Um, and Tarkovsky's like, from what I know, relies a lot on like very slow and long takes in his stories. And this is no different. Like there's so many shots that you sort of take their time as they're sort of like zooming in or zooming out or panning left, panning right, just like slowly moving in um into these discussions, into this world known as the zone. And it is a very intimidating like thing because like it's something where the runtime is like not like crazy, like 2 hours and 41 minutes. Like what we just watched the Odyssey. It's
Yeah,
it's
the house
longer
is
than
longer.
this. It's longer than this. And of course, like what Bellatar's Satan Tango. Like you have to spend the whole fucking day to watch that thing. Um, but here it's just like, it's so not like slow cinema in a sense of like the length, but more slow cinema in the way of how it's sort of discussing these themes and these philosophies that each of these characters are sort of going through. And it's like it's intriguing just like how they're going on this journey. Because even then, like the journey isn't quite that crazy either. It's like you sort of see like the zone, and it sort of looks like a very desolate field you would find somewhere, which isn't the harp on the film, but it is sort of grounds itself in that level of realism in some cases. But it sort of like paints like this sort of picture of like how you're going through this place with not necessarily logic but feeling. Um and it's sort of like an instance of where you're sort of having logic and emotion sort of combating in this one place where it's the Stalker character is purely guided by instinct, while the professor and the writer are purely guided by logic. And and there's obviously different points of views that they all three of them have on the world. In some cases, like the writer like sort of thinks of his art in a way that is like, is it even my art anymore since like people are consuming it? Or and then you get the professor like who's sort of just like a little more nihilistic in some cases, and you know trying to like do this for his own personal gain. And then you get the Stalker who's just like not necessarily having an idea of like desire, but more desire to like, I mean, yeah, I guess a desire in a sense, but he sort of has much more of a feels like he has a purpose and just trying to give people belief. So it's kind of like interesting seeing all three of these men sort of like talk about each of their philosophies and points of view on life, and it really culminates in a pretty like oddly enough like emotionally engaging like film, like just from a pure monologue and dialogue standpoint. Like there's just so many moments here that just like they just stick with you. Like even if it takes a while to get there, and even if there's like a little bit of level of tension, it like sticks with you. Like the whole experience really just sticks. Like it's really
Yeah,
insane. So
yeah. The setting also too is what adds a lot to the intrigue as well, because it starts off in like a sepia tone. I'm not sure when exactly this film takes place, but it's assumingly in a somewhat realistic future. But it's all sepia tone, and it's really interesting how it immediately, even in like a real world setting, feels otherworldly. It kind of is reminiscent of like Hodorowski in that way, where even the the normal is a bit strange also, and it almost adds this layer of like historicity, as if we're visualizing an author's text come to life. Like it already carries a sense of it being passed down in some way, like we're looking into the past. And but then immediately when we head into the zone, it turns into regular color almost. I don't know if I'm like reading into this too much. There is almost like a Wizard of Oz parallel to with how the characters are traveling into this new environment in search of something greater, but it's really in their own lives where that's where they find the sense of structure and like solace also. And it's interesting how I was looking up about the film too. Apparently it was a very complicated shoot. They had to like reshoot the film because of like poor film stock. And supposedly where they shot the zone scenes, it was like a chemical plant. So a lot of at first I thought, was this supposed to be like a commentary on like the Chernobyl disaster? But the Chernobyl disaster happened after Stalker came out, which is pretty wild. So it, yeah. So basically, what I'm saying is that because of the environment they shot, a lot of the film crew got like cancer, or and like eventually died too. I think it's speculated that the filming process for Stalker, like health wise, contributed to Tarkovsky's death in like the late '80s or early '90s. I forget
Yeah,
when
yeah,
he passed, but
he like died around like 86, I believe, and I think the
oh
sound
wow.
editor on this film like confirmed that like this shoot did contribute to his death in some respects. So it's crazy. Yeah, like very sad in a lot of cases. But and so I guess like I mean, even with like the context of all that, it's very like it's sort of like it resonates a lot because you kind of feel like this is like Tarkovsky's sort of speaking in a way that is rather hopeful. Because no, when I think of like Russian cinema, I don't really think about emotion all that much, oddly enough. And that just kind of shows like there's probably more Russian cinema I have to watch. Um, Obviously one that's not, um, you know, governmentally oversighted or whatever. But you know, it kind of shows like how vast and you know like huge Russian cinema is. But I think it's like I was thinking like about the emotions that like he's sort of like Tarkovsky's sort of like expressing through the screenplay, and just sort of how like the story sort of like leads to this whole idea of like there's not like enough hope left in the world um in some cases, and there's like a mysticism and fantasy to the room. Like the room, like we never see. Like we only see probably about its doorway and then the characters looking for the doorway, but we never actually go inside it. Um yeah, so but it sort of has like this ambiguous like character about it where it's the whole idea of it, it's like it's supposed to grant you your most like desired wishes. And in some cases like you could think you're going to be wishing for something that is going to be like you know what you actually wanted, that is going to leave an impact, but you don't know what those subconscious desires are. And in a case of like how like the stalker sort of sees the room as like a beacon of hope, in some cases like the writer and the professor don't see it that way. The professor sort of sees it as something that should be like destroyed in some cases, and should not be given to like the most greedy and selfish people on the planet, while the writer sort of has a more atheistic view of it where he doesn't think it actually works in some cases. Like he but you sort of think about how the writer is sort of thinking like in this very atheistic way about it. And yeah, it's like a really strong like examination of how these philosophies like, and especially like realistic philosophies can sometimes like take away from like the idea of faith in this film. Um and sort of like how the stalker sort of just sees this as a way to like, I guess like you could sort of describe the stalker as like sort of like this sort of Jesus figure in some cases where, he's trying to guide people to faith. Well, it's sort of like what if Jesus decided to guide like the most atheistic person on the planet? Like, it's a very interesting like concept. And how they sort of like had this room sort of be like its own character, even despite the fact we don't see it. Like we never see the room at all. Like we just sort of hear it talked about and just like what it means to people. So it's a really interesting like philosophy that is dive into.
Well, like in terms of like interpretation of cinema, this is like one of the prime examples of just how, in a way, almost every element of the film is open to some degree of interpretation. In my eyes, I almost wonder if The Room even exists. It's like this theoretical concept that every character has an idea of what they want out of the room in that way, but it's like, is that really, you can't necessarily pinpoint that down to just one location, because if it's open to depending on the views of the individual, what does that really mean? Does like, when in a certain way, when you walk into a church, for example, the church holds a ton of sacred power for those who are believers, but for some people, when they walk in, if they're not believers, they admire just the architecture or the they're just in awe of the building itself. Like that takes on an entirely different meaning. So is there really a sacred space that can provide individualized meaning in any way? And I don't think so in that regard. So for me, that's why I almost wondered if The Room was even in existence. And The Zone too almost brings out everybody's own self-doubts and insecurities, which I found really interesting. It almost seems like what you're saying about locations becoming characters in and of themselves. It's like them being in this environment is almost changing them rather than the other way around, because the zone is it's like this abandoned, do you want to say wasteland? I don't even know if wasteland's the right term, but it's like it hasn't been touched in what looks like years. There's like tanks too, for example, and like abandoned like stagnant water too. But it hasn't really evolved yet, because it's still, at the end of the day, it's a rather green looking space. It seems kind of peaceful, but it's almost like frozen in time too. And I don't know about you, but it's like, because of like how desolate and also just how densely philosophical it was, I felt like kind of sad watching the film overall, just because of the way it examines these people and just how the film essentially is just them spouting off their ideologies and what that means to them. But really, everyone has their own sort of personalized belief and even like almost psychological trauma that it kind of like makes you reflect on your own existence in that way, which is probably one of the best things art can do. So I don't know, for some reason it just kind of it was captivating, but also kind of saddening too, just because it shows like, oh yeah, there is still what really is the purpose then for us in life, if it's bringing these questions out of us.
Yeah, it's like, I wouldn't say it's like the first art house, because I mean, there's a lot of art house that has existed for like a long time, but I think, like the films we watched, like, while we were in college, or like, I don't know, like, we were talking about it too, like before this episode, how we, you know, our first introduction to like art house cinema in some cases, with like intro to film analysis that we took back at Iowa, where like what I talked about how I watched Persona from Ingmar Bergman, while you watched Cather's
Oh
Cinema.
yeah,
By Godard.
History du Cinema by Jean-Luc Godard.
Yeah.
The first part, at least, which is one of the most
Holy
insanely experimental and dense films I've ever seen.
yeah, it's like and this one is like it has a lot of like experimental level in it, but it's definitely like where so how these philosophies are sort of talked about and how they're sort of presented like really works because it's so simple in how it's filmed. Like just nothing like when we talk about like the sci-fi in this film, it's not necessarily much in the case of like what's in the film. Like there is sort of like this utopia sort of level place to like, you know, the like the world outside the zone where like you said it's like this very sepia tone colored location um and it sort of feels different from the rest of the zone and you kind of get like it's gist of like government oversight or whatever and some cases where like the zone is completely forbidden um and then you like walk into a world that's like a little more colorful, a little more something we're used to, but it's like it's a case of like how that is so otherworldly compared to the other part of the film, which is very interesting. But it's not like there's many sci-fi elements like that we're used to seeing. Like we don't see like an alien, we don't see like a flying car or whatever. Or we don't see like, robots or we don't see those type of things. And so like, people are like, oh, how does this denote as science fiction? It's like, well, it's the feeling of it. It's sort of like the idea of the room sort of being this really omnipresent sort of location. And even like the zones sort of having this level of character to it where it's like the naturalistic environment is the most like scientific science fiction level thing here. And it's very interesting, like in this how all these events unfold. And like I know I sort of mentioned like the idea of like how it's like all instinctual. I think like there's a part of this film that stuck out to me about how like the writer is, thinking of a logical step to get into where the room is, and the stalker's telling him it's like, oh, don't go that way. It's like sometimes like the most straight and narrow path isn't quite as straight and narrow as you think, and you see like the writers sort of dismiss it a little bit, and just and then you see him like walk forward, and all of a sudden you get like this very instinctual feeling that he has or whatever, and it's like yeah like the stalker is right in this instance so there's like it's interesting just like how this whole place just sort of like leads with on the sort of level of like feeling where like the path to like your like to the room of your biggest desires isn't quite as easy as you think it is. Like there's probably like something that could potentially happen and like how it's like the moment where like the writer just sort of throws the logic out the window here, and because he's probably like the most logical person out of the three characters. I mean, no, the professor is too. Like the professor has like a very like nihilistic way of viewing the room, but the the writer is like a little more pessimistic about the idea. He seems a little bit more like a little bit more like sort of like I said, like sort of like a more modern atheist type guy. So like he has, and so it is like interesting that like how that emotion sort of like created that from that moment really created just like this epiphany that he probably had never felt before, but still sort of feels a little bit more still feels resentful by the end. So it's really interesting and just how like this own sort of like has its like level of science fiction level to it, even if it's not like the science fiction we're used to. So
Yeah, it's like minimalist science fiction in that way, and we're kind of similar to the Odyssey. How what we expect out of science fiction, the grander scale, like if you think about aliens or spaceships, or even just far future civilizations like Blade Runner. Like there's none of that here. It's very grounded, and also sort of leading to a fantastical way, like where, like I said, where it fits in timeline wise in terms of it could be, you could interpret as being in the future, in the past, or in present, all like an alternative present too. So yeah, it kind of reminds me. I don't know if you've ever seen Primer by Shane Carruth. How that basically, for anyone who hasn't seen Primer, it's about like two guys who accidentally discover time travel, but the way they approach it in a very grounded and incredibly minimalist way too, because I think it only costs like $10,000 to make. But that unique approach to science fiction, it shows that there is so much versatility with the genre, whereas you can have something like that where it's just two guys discovering time travel as like mathematicians basically, and then you could have something like Stalker where it is inherently science fiction with its setting and its characteristics, but it really exists as an avenue to explore philosophy and interpretation of the meaning of human existence basically. And kind of like I was saying earlier, that for that it's almost better because it will never feel dated in that way, because philosophy lives on for the till the end of time. Like when we're long dead, people will still be having conversations about purpose, and also how sacred beliefs dating back to ancient civilization have influenced the current day too. So yeah, I think that's probably what was captivating me a lot about the film, was just like what Tarkovsky was trying to like, what statement was he making basically out of this, and perhaps maybe we'll never know, obviously, because he's no longer with us, and maybe it's best that we don't have an answer for everything, and that way the ambiguity is what gives Stalker such a unique power overall. Sort of like how the room does too, or just it kind of begs the question, like, is there a greater power even in, not only in this world but also in our world too? Like, who's really in control?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I guess like the most captivating scene in this movie is definitely once they find the room. Um and obviously you have the stalker sort of talking about his mentor named Porcupine, who, you know, how, Porcupine had this like sort of desire of like seeing his deceased brother, but once he entered in the room, didn't like he didn't get that wish of seeing him again. He got wealth, and wealth is like a very huge part of the human ambition. And so, Porcupine, I guess trigger warning, like, hung himself, and, which inevitably killed him. Um, and I like the idea of like, how that scene is presented, because the writer is like, the stalker is obviously running completely on the emotion of it all. Because, like, there's a, like, they're getting in a scuffle with the professor because the professor wants to throw like a bomb in the room just to completely destroy it, preventing like, anybody who wants to use it for like profitable or, malicious intent, like, can't use it. And, you know, so like you kind of get like his perspective on it, and then, like the writer, you know, a little bit like, a little more honest about it, like, like brutally honest about it to the stalker, like, explaining like, his traumas in a logical way. Like it is, like it's rather captivating. Like it's a really great scene, and like just how like like, the actor playing him, Anatoly Solenitsyn, I think that's how you pronounce his name, is sort of like portraying this level of like, you know, um, realism here. While the stalker is just like uncontrollably crying. It's like it's heart wrenching. It's like heart wrenching to see that happen, and then, the writers sort of like, they, and inevitably, like, they don't go in the room at all. Like the professor doesn't go through with his plan. um, of destroying the room. The writer doesn't take a step in. The stalker doesn't even bother to guide him in. They just sit like in silence outside of it, and then like you get this really good shot of like just the rain coming down while they're all just sort of sitting contemplating with like what they've like just been through with like the guilt and just the philosophies that the writer was explaining. It's like, oh, that is such a beautiful, beautiful shot. And the fact that it like lasted like what, a few minutes, like it's impressive. Like it really was sort of like the cream on the cake there when that shot happened. Oh,
Yeah, I almost half expected the movie to just end there, to tell you
mm,
the truth, and
oh.
which would have been really interesting, but probably even more bleak
Oh
than
yeah,
it really
yeah.
than it really was. But yeah, no, I also I think you mentioned like sort of like the fourth wall break too that
Hmm.
Tarkovsky brings in, almost like breaking the illusion in a sense, like diving deeper into the psychology of the character, and in a way almost going to show that like filmmakers are storytellers too. They're not archaeologists, they're not cartographers either. So it's really trying to get into that headspace, and in some cases you need to like break that metaphorical wall to address it head on to the audience.
Yeah,
And
very much so.
also too like the I forgot to mention like the score too,
Hmm.
for the most part. Like even though it's fairly minimal, but like when they're riding on the train to get to the zone, how it's like it's so hypnotic too. So yeah, everything about the film like is very. It has the sense of hypnosis because it's not overly flashy or showy, but just like the little things that Tarkovsky brings in to make it so captivating is really cool to see. And it's kind of like it's like a self-imposed limitation that he has to bring out this unique sense and this unique mood and tone out of the story.
Yeah, it's interesting because like you have like a lot of this film is like very much like long takes. So
Mm-hmm.
like the
A lot
camera
of long
is like
takes.
slowly approaching characters and slowly moving away from characters, but it's sort of like guiding you into like the minds of how these gentlemen think, and it's very interesting and just how it just sort of like it's enticing. Like it's very enticing. I think like the scene of them, like you mentioned, with on like the train cart or whatever, and it's like probably just about like 10 minutes of that one shot of just like them all riding on there, but it's some like just something about the sound effect of like hearing that thing move, and then just sort of the score like sort of having this very electronic um, synthy vibe to it. Like it really just it draws you in somehow. Like it really draws you in. Um, and yeah, I found that to be like really, really impressive just from a total like filmmaking standpoint. Like like the fact that you could have a take like that seems like okay pretty monotonous, but it actually works in a way that actually kind of draws you into like the whole transporting into the zone. And yeah, I found that really really impressive. It's really hard to like grasp on like a lot of the themes, but I think that's intentional. Like he's it's clear that there's like a lot of this idea of like the room sort of being like this beacon of hope, and it's kind of like oh how little hope is left in the world. Like it like yeah, it's like you said, it's very depressing. Like it's not uplifting in the slightest. Just because it's like exploring it in a way that is, like pretty real, and like, it's kind of like questioning the idea of like whether or not this type of fantasy exists in this world. Because and I guess that's like the whole desire of it, like, the room sort of thinking of like this like fantastical thing, that's the nature of it, but it really, like, it's just it's a very like pessimistic view that Tarkovsky had, but I think it's an idea of like, yeah, there probably should be at least like some capacity of faith in this world, and you know and like how that can and that you kind of see how it motivates the stalker but doesn't motivate the writer or the professor inside us, like, they are wanting to see it just to see if it actually exists, and if it does exist, like, blow it up or whatever. It's like it's a very, very grim future, which it resonates, like it really resonates. I feel like this is a film that really can resonate across generation to generation, even if it feels like intimidating and unaccessible. It's like it's very hard not to be gripped by what's going on here. So
Yeah, I'm curious what you think about the ending too,
yeah,
because I thought the ending was very interesting.
yeah, it is. So I guess spoilers for Stalker. But yeah, I think
Yeah,
we both agree that it's a great movie, but I think this is probably the biggest spoiler of the film. I mean, no, we already talked about how they don't enter the room. But yeah, so in the ending, with the couple's daughter, like the stalker and the stalker's wife, so there's an interesting way on how this film ends where, the girl is using like telekinesis of some sort to push like three glasses across the table. And then, a train like is shaking the room as like Ode to Joy is playing in the background. And then it just sort of like just ends. And I don't know, I guess like it's something that interests me a lot because I was reading a lot of like interpretations of it, and there's like a lot of like it's interesting and just how like the film is sort of like presents itself here. And I guess like there's like ways you could say, like, some people say it could be like the death of hope here, where, the idea of like when the girl like psychologically pushes the glass over the table, like that's sort of it of like all the hope in the world, or there's kind of like an idea that, oh, maybe there's a level of hope still there, um like that, is very like that, we don't like that, is completely contradicting what the writer is saying. So there is a very it's like one of those endings. It's like, it's like, does the top fall in Inception, or what does Bruce not Bruce Bill Murray say to Scarlett Johansson at the end of Lost in Translation? It's like it's a lot of ambiguity there that I think you can really bring it into any interpretation. It's like, are you thinking like, did she actually like, is this something we're imagining? Is this something that, we're choosing to like omit? Like, is there like, is this something that's in the mind of the stalker? Like, there's a lot of ways you could really interpret this. I guess like my mind in some cases is that it is sort of showing that there is a little bit of hope in the world, but it's just barely scraping by. Um, but it is, I don't know, it's rather interesting. I guess like one of the things that I do sort of interpret a lot is like the different types of glasses. Like they each have like a different type of liquid in it. So you get one glass that moves very close to the edge but doesn't necessarily get there. You get another that just doesn't move at all. Then you get the other glass that just potentially like that, just falls off the table. And so I guess you can sort of interpret each glass as like each individual, where the dark glass that moves to the edge, you could say, is maybe the professor, because he's close to like blowing up the room or whatever. The other glass is the stalker, who sticks behind, and the other one is the writer, who like fell off the table or something. So I don't know, there's like a lot of ways to like really think about this level of interpretation, but it's sort of like a question of faith, and like whether or not that faith really shines through or not. So,
Yeah, I sort of took it as that there is still some hope left in the world, but it could, because she uses psychokinesis, which is such it's more of a fantastical power. Like perhaps there's this idea that, oh, whatever is next is something that we will never be able to understand or comprehend, and that could mean a variety of different things depending on like how old you are when you watch the film. Like if you're, for some reason, if you're a kid watching this, you could probably identify more with that. But if you're like older too, it's like you have this existential crisis where you wonder, oh man, I'm never going to understand what the kids are doing now, or when I'm gone, like who knows what's going to happen. And you can also interpret too that there is like this like spiritual level kind of, I like the interpretation about how the three glasses represent the three characters too, and how like their fate essentially is like almost like at the mercy of some greater divine power too. So yeah, I tend to believe that is a bit more optimistic, but I could see the interpretation of it being way more just dour and bleak, and how there really is no hope left in the world too. But when that happened, the ending, to me that's like one of the best scenes in the entire film, just because it really leaves you with a lot of questions, and the fact that the psychokinesis is really some of the only like magic or fantasy in the film that at least we witness ourselves too. So in that way, it's almost special. It's like Tarkovsky is peeling back the curtain in that way, and like we're witnessing it, but none of the other characters are going to be able to see this. So
yeah, it's like a level where it's like also open to interpretation, that like you could really spend like probably hours and hours just like reading and listening to people's different takes on the ending. It's like it really, and that just shows like how much a film can really resonate with people. Because like it brings you on this like really long journey of just philosophy, but you're sort of like obviously now trying to find meaning in that case, and so we don't necessarily like know exactly what Tarkovsky, like what he thinks himself. I mean, I haven't necessarily read into it, if I'm being honest, if he had a take on the ending that was different, that is definitive for him. But I like the idea that it's a way for the audience to sort of leave it up to their own imagination. To be honest, like that's the best type of film, like one that could really sit long with you and just help like make you think about questions to answer after it's over. It's like that just shows like the power that film can have. It's really awesome.
yeah, in a lot of cases, Stalker is the embodiment of what film is, like not only just in terms of how creative, but also how thought provoking it can be too. How it's able to bring out these types of deep philosophical questions, because obviously movies by and large are meant to be entertainment. I would say, at least that's how it's perceived in majority of the public's eye. But it could also be something like this, where it is essentially in and of itself its own work of art. Like this is one of the preeminent art films too for that reason.
Yeah, most definitely. So, but it's very nice. I guess I get surprised for both of us. I guess I get surprised me on like how much it like resonated. So, but yeah, it is insane that like this director has been on our radar for a while, and it's like now I'm taking the time to actually like watch it. Like, oh, like a few days after the Odyssey, like is like it's a completely different experience, but. It is like one that like the first time I like watching it, I can never forget like like seeing these moments like for the first time. Like it's surprisingly resonates. Like even like a few days after watching it, it resonates a
For
lot.
sure, yeah.
So
Yeah, it sticks with you.
yeah, it's the best type of film. But I guess we could just go into final thoughts real quick.
Yeah, it's a really really captivating film. I would say like at some point everyone should watch this at least once, but don't feel the need to like see it like right away because like I said, it's dense. It's very there's a lot that happens in it. There's a lot to think about too. And you don't really want to like rush into it. You kind of want to like take your time and sort of like ease into it too. So yeah, whenever you get like this desire to see Stalker, definitely watch it because it really is something special. I'm more interested to see Tarkovsky films after this, so I feel like this is the good one to start with. But yeah, really, really incredible film, and I'm glad you recommended it for this episode. So it's a 9 out of 10. It's really really something that I would like to see it again, but I'll probably give it a few years.
Yeah, it'll probably be the same thing for me too. 9 out of 10. I mean, I was surprised on how the filmmaking language just spoke. Because I think that's like the thing about art house cinema. It's not necessarily about the language of like the dialogue or story, but more or less the language of how a film is presented and like just how the scenes sort of build on top of one another. And Tarkovsky understood that like to a T, obviously. Like, he's one of the most influential filmmakers out there, especially in international cinema. And like you could see like lots of influences from filmmakers today. Not much in Western cinema, but I guess like the one example is Alex Garland's Annihilation. Arguably does take from it, even though the author like debunked the idea that he took any inspiration from Stalker or the source material. But I don't know. Yeah, once the language is set, you could probably say there's at least a level of influence there, and you could definitely see it in a lot of other art house films as well. But yeah, Stalker like just it works. Like it really and draws you in with these really like beautiful slow takes and slow pans and slow zooms and really makes you think about life in a way like yeah that is depressing but can leave you like hopeful by the end depending on what you interpret by the ending depending on what you interpret from the ending and yeah definitely a filmmaker I want to dive more into. It might take me a bit, just because, like, the stuff he talks about is just real heavy, and you just gotta really take the time to like breathe before you can watch another Tarkovsky film. But yeah, certainly a 9 out of 10 is where Stalker is gonna be. So. All right. I believe it's Zirek. No.
Yeah, so I'll just say right now, this is probably the total opposite of Stalker. But there's a film that I think would be I'm going to recommend something that's a lot of fun, basically. It's one that I think embodies, when I was saying the entertainment of cinema, this is one where it's just pure adrenaline, pure entertainment, and in my opinion, might be my favorite comedy film ever. And it also happens to be celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. And by the time this upcoming episode will be out, it'll be a certain season where people are going to be going back to school. And I thought, well, let's talk about maybe the best high school movie ever. And also, like I said, probably my favorite comedy. And that is the 1986 classic, Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
We're going to break some fourth walls with this one.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, that's a film I have not seen. I know it's like...
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm fucking serious.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I know a lot about John Hughes' work. And Ferris Bueller is just so iconic. Like
it is an iconic film.
Yeah, it's iconic. It's so ubiquitous with pop culture. I mean, but yeah, it's going to be an experience, that's for sure.
Cool.
Yeah. And if you want to experience Ferris Bueller along with us and don't want to get spoiled for the next episode, watch the film before we drop another one on the next Monday. We publish episodes every other Monday at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern. And of course, we have Letterboxd, Twitter, X, whatever. We have Letterboxd, Twitter, and Instagram, so feel free to give us a follow on those. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, feel free to hit that follow button. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. Really appreciate it. Leave a comment if you want to. Obviously, be nicer than the people who decided to target Elliot Page for some reason. And and of course, hit the bell icon if you want to know when we get a new episode out. But in the meantime, I've been Daniel.
And I've been Matthew.
And I hope you have a good rest of your week.
Yep. Bye.